The latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. Now they are going after our professors who are making sure they bring everything in the dark to light for us. Who is Professor Nelson Franklin? To the students of political science, he is a man of books, but to the French administration, he has become a man of danger. Franklin is not a soldier. He does not carry an AK-47. He carries a pen, just an ordinary pen, and he carries the data. He is one of the key voices who has been tracking the movement of the A400M Atlas plane from Pau to Paroko. He has been the one providing us with the latest coordinates of the secret French logistics in northern Benin. Because he has pulled back the veil on the December 7 coup attempt and revealed the French Special Forces' role in rescuing Patrice Talon, his PE, he has been marked. The leopard does not like it when you shine a torch into its cave. In a move that mirrors the tactics used against the leaders of the Sahel Alliance, Emmanuel Macron has reportedly moved to freeze the bank accounts, real estate holdings, and intellectual property royalties of Professor Franklin held within French jurisdictions. The justification. Paris claims these measures are taken under anti-destabilization laws. They always have big names. They accuse Franklin of inciting revolt, I wonder where, and spreading disinformation that threatens the safety of French personnel in West Africa. The irony. Is it disinformation to track a military plane that is visible to every satellite? Is it inciting revolt to ask why a foreign army is building a base near the Niger border without a vote in the Benin National Assembly? A man who tells the truth is often called a madman by those who profit from the lie. By freezing these assets, France is attempting a financial assassination. They want to ensure that Professor Franklin cannot travel, cannot fund his research, and cannot keep the lights on in the offices where the truth is processed. We spoke earlier about the information watercress, that tangled mesh of censorship used to hide the build-up in Benin. This asset freeze is the latest strand in that mesh. Fear as a teacher. The freeze is a warning to other professors, journalists, and activists in Cotonou and Abidjan. It says, if you speak like Franklin, you will lose like Franklin.
Deprived of your own personal funds by administrative decision, pending possible legal action. What are the grounds for this decision notified to you, Mr. Nyamsi? Good evening to you all on RT. I thank you. The grounds for the arbitrary decision taken by President Macron's government through, in fact, two ministers, the Minister of Economy and Finance and the Minister of the Interior, who issued a joint decree. The reasons put forward are not judicial reasons. Since the French executive embodied by Mr. Macron has decided to move the courthouse to the Élysée, it is the French government that decides, under a law it implemented against interference, that I am guilty of harming the French nation, of harming defense, diplomacy, of harming sovereignty, of harming the population, the safety of the French population, and on the basis of this unilateral decision by Mr. Macron and his two ministers, those of the Interior and the Economy, they are freezing all my assets and all my economic goods and property in France, where I am nevertheless the father of 4 children, including 2 students in higher education, aged 26 and 24, and 2 young minor children aged 13 and 7. With as the only source of income what I produce for my family. So my wife and our 4 children. So Mr. Macron, in reality, is committed to punishing me because I contribute to the criticism of France's neocolonialist policy in Africa. But, he added an even more scandalous reason. He claims that this criticism, I make it under the influence of the Federation of Russia and the governments of the Alliance of Sahel States, Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, while I am an associate professor, university doctor and writer since I was 19. That is practically 30 years of producing books, conferences, events and participation in political parties, in political associations that have constantly denounced the military occupation of Africa by the French army and all neocolonial and imperialist armies, the CFA Franc, France's interference in the designation of African leaders and the bludgeoning cultural of Francophony against Africanophony, and the cultural sovereignty of Africans. I am not new. I did not start my political and intellectual engagement with the arrival of Mr. Macron in 2017 to power in France. I have been writing since 1992 and have constantly defended the same theses. I am therefore actually literally a victim of a crime of lèse-majesté decreed by the Prince, having concentrated all the means of the state at the Élysée and not even allowing French judges to evaluate and examine these accusations in an adversarial process. It is a dictatorial drift which clearly shows that the dictatorships that we have known in Africa are indeed the emanation of French colonialism and neocolonialism. I often say that the antecedent, French colonialism, begins to resemble its image. That is to say that the dictatorships that we have experienced in Francophone Africa are entirely now reconfigured and revealed in their full entirety, where they were fomented in the pseudo-colonization of the 6 zeros. So next Monday, my lawyers are introducing a contentious proceeding at the administrative court to give the opportunity for French justice to express itself, because all this happens away from French justice. Mr. Macron uses the law against me, exactly as he uses the 49.3 against Parliament. We are dealing with an unspeakable autocratic drift. I was a French citizen under 3 presidents before Mr. Macron. I have never been the subject of such an inquisitorial procedure. It is scandalous. Yes, Mr. Nyamsi, there you have it. Pending the legal proceedings you are told about next Monday. According to you, what message do the authorities want to convey through such a procedure against you? It is actually a severe psychological threat, an intimidation and a terror that they want to impose on opinions, African in general and African in France in particular. It is a mass intimidation having the goal of preventing Africans who have acquired French citizenship or who are French citizens from being in solidarity with the tragedies of our native continent. In reality, the Macron government has lost the battle of truth and justice on the field of ideas, on the field of debate. It launched a communicational war against Pan-Africanists. It lost it, and now it wants to win it, by acts of violence, by character assassination, by homicide operations and by the return of the French medieval Inquisition. Professor Nyamsi, you mentioned African opinions. In what way can Pan-Africanism disturb today a certain French political elite? The French political elite of the Fifth Republic built France's power on the shameless exploitation of Africa. President Jacques Chirac, who was twice elected president of the French Republic, said that a good part of the money that we have in our pockets in France comes from the exploitation of Africa for several centuries, and the current French president, Emmanuel Macron, himself acknowledged in June 2017, in an interview given to Le Figaro, that France was wrong to destroy Libya because it resulted everywhere in failed Sahelian states and terrorist groups that prosper. So, in reality, the power of France was built on the organized powerlessness of Africa, through servants of colonialism, of French neocolonialism, but also through mass crimes, wars of extermination, through the principle of divide and rule, through the principle of doublespeak, the democratic proclamation, human rights rhetoric, on one side, and on the other side, the most scabrous practices of this famous Franafrique mafia, to which I have dedicated 30 years of my work as an essayist and political philosopher. Thank you, Professor Nyamsi. For these explanations, I remind that you are a philosopher, author and president of the Institute of Africa of Freedoms. You were with us live from Bamako, Mali. Thank you.
Cutting the signal. By targeting his assets, they target his ability to host the servers and the platforms that bring you this information. The illegal asset narrative. Watch how the French-aligned media RF1 France 24 will now begin to question where Franklin got his money. They will try to paint him as a paid agent of Moscow, Russia. To justify the freeze, it is the old playbook. If you cannot kill the messenger, destroy the messenger's reputation. Professor Nelson Franklin legal team, a coalition of Pan-African lawyers and international human rights experts, has filed a massive challenge at the African Court on Human and People's Rights and the United Nations Human Rights Committee. They are not just asking for the money back. They are putting the French information war on trial. Here are the 4 specific legal pillars they are using to break the freeze. Pillar 1, the financial lawfare argument. The defense argues that France is guilty of abuse of power for political ends. The argument. Under international law, asset freezes are meant for terrorists and war criminals, those who pose a physical threat to life. Franklin's team is arguing that a professor publishing flight data of A400M military planes is a protected act of academic freedom and whistleblowing. The evidence. They have submitted proof that Franklin's research is based on OSINT, open source intelligence information that is already published. They are telling the court you cannot freeze a man's life for looking at the skies and telling his neighbors what he sees. Pillar 2. Violation of the right to property. African Charter. Franklin's team is invoking Article 14 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. The argument. This article guarantees the right to property. The defense argues that France, by freezing assets held in French-aligned banks in the CFA zone and Europe, is performing an extraterritorial seizure without a criminal conviction. The sting. They are calling it a neo-colonial tax, arguing that France still treats African assets as its own property to be seized whenever a voice becomes too loud. Pillar 3. Breach of due process. The secret decree. In the village we say, you cannot condemn a man in a room he is not allowed to enter. The argument. The freeze was enacted via an administrative decree, not a court order. This means Franklin was never charged, never seen a judge, and never allowed to defend himself before his accounts were emptied. The legal goal. They are filing for an interim measure, an emergency order to unfreeze the funds immediately while the larger case continues, arguing that the professor cannot even pay his legal team to defend his rights if his hands are tied behind his back. Pillar 4. The discrimination and racial profiling claim. This is the heavy hitter. The legal team is arguing that the Macron administration is specifically targeting Pan-African intellectuals while ignoring foreign or Western researchers who publish the same data. The comparison. They have pointed out that European tracking sites like Flight Radar 24 show the same French military movement, yet face no freeze. By targeting Franklin, they argue France is practicing intellectual segregation, trying to intimidate African scholars from analyzing their own continent's security. This case is bigger than one man. If Franklin loses, it means any African who tracks a French plane, any blogger who reveals a secret base in Benin, or any researcher who questions the iron encirclement can have their life deleted with a single click from Paris. But if he wins, if the court rules that this freeze is illegal, it will be the end of financial lawfare in Africa. It will mean the leopard can no longer use the bank to silence the truth. In Niamey, in Ouagadougou, and in Bamako, including Cotonou, citizens are mobilizing. Even though the ones in Cotonou cannot speak out loud, but they are still supporting in their little way because they need to whisper. And people are raising funds to make sure they protect Professor Franklin, because we know and believe that the African has a right to speak out. If the Westerners are publishing the same data and their assets aren't freeze, why is it that an African is doing same and we are seeing our assets being frozen? We need to come together to fight in our little way, and we have to continue to share so that the world will know the injustice that they are meting out on Africa. These are the same people who are talking about human rights, claiming our leaders in the Sahel are not allowing the people to choose the leader, even though the people openly came out demonstrating, supporting the leaders in the Sahel. But simply because they didn't use the oppressors' rule, they still find means and ways to call it not legal. We are the only ones that can set ourselves free. United we stand, divided we fall, and united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we'll make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world, in Europe and in France.